Hi, this is Adam Friedman from Stratford Technology. I am here to create a follow-up video to the one I created last month regarding Smartview Options. And my intention here is to continue down that road. Last time we went over member options in some detail. And today I'd like to just go over some of the data options that you may find useful. And I'm going to start by talking, we'll go down the list here, but we're going to focus on the ones that I think are going to be useful the most. So let's talk about suppression. So in a typical case, as you're drilling around, and this is assuming you're doing ad hoc analysis, you're going to drill in, and in this case we're drilling into the sales departments, and you see the departments are kind of regional based. And I'm going to also drill down into product. And when I drill down into product, we're going to start seeing some interesting things. Like, for example, pretty much all the time, and this is regardless of which department we're in. In fact, let's drill out for a second and just look at product. No product is always missing. Now, that could be interesting. No product may have some meaning. It's also very possible that no product has no meaning whatsoever. In other words, sales is never booked to no product, but no product needed to be in this dimension for some reason. So what you might want to do as a user is suppress missings. And that's this one up here, this suppress no data missing. Right? And by doing that, I'm just going to check it on and hit refresh. You'll see that sales, no product, is going to go away. Okay, well that's interesting. But what if I'm going to change my mind for a second here, because for two reasons. One is I want to show you something, but two is, well, I got two things to show you. So if I hit refresh now, and this is important to note, no product is not coming back. In order to get it back, we're going to have to zoom out and zoom back in. So, or do a keep only and zoom back in. So I'm going to go to Essbase, keep only, and then zoom in. Now, so now our missing is back. Now, the reason this is somewhat interesting, and I want to drill down here, is whereas no product being missing might be something that you always want to suppress, there are cases, and I'm going to bring up an example here. Turns out in the West, we don't have any data for computer accessories. Nobody in the Western region sells computer accessories. So it says missing. Now in Essbase, this is important. Missing is there is no data in that cell. That is not the same as a zero. So it's interesting, when you're doing drill down, would you want this to show up as missing, as zero, or not show up at all? Because maybe West doesn't sell computer accessories. So this is kind of important, and you need to know your data to know what it is that you want to do. But as this is just an example, what I'd like to do is talk through a couple options. So you have your no data missing, which we already kind of talked about, and that's obviously going to make this disappear. You also have suppress zeros. Now that's a different thing. That means somebody actually put a zero into the database. So it's not missing. It's not really like an invalid combination. What they're saying is zero. So maybe somebody just didn't sell anything, and you'd want zeros to not be suppressed in that case. But sometimes, some companies, and yours included, may load zeros into the database, and that really is the same in a sense as no data or missing. So in that case, you'd want to suppress all of them. You can imagine what happens there. I'm not actually going to demonstrate it, because essentially all that's going to happen is we're going to lose all the missing, and we're going to miss something that I want to talk about next. Let's jump down. We're going to come back to repeated members in a second. But let's just jump down to replacement. You have the option here to replace missings or no access or invalid data. Right now it's set to show up as missing. right? So you see pound missing. But what if really that data means something, and maybe for Excel purposes you want it to have a numeric 0 or a 0. Well, by changing no data missing to numeric 0, anything that's missing is now going to show up as a 0. In fact, let's demonstrate that. So having changed it to numeric 0, I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to hit refresh. And now we have them set as Excel zeros, formatted in a way that Excel is formatting them. You can change the Excel formatting if you wanted to show this as a 0. Now, what's interesting about this is once I changed this to numeric 0, I have a submit 0 that became an option. When this was set to missing, this was blanked out. Couldn't do anything here. Now this is set to numeric 0. What Essbase doesn't want you to do is inadvertently submit data that are zeros. Zeros can clog up an Essbase database meaninglessly sometimes. Sometimes they're meaningless, sometimes they're not, and context is important. The point here being that you can only submit a literal 0 to the database if you check on submit 0. And that's an important thing to know about. So with regards to this, if you wanted your data to come back nice and look like a report, numeric 0 would be right. No access label has to do with security. So maybe there may or may not be data in an intersection, but you don't have access to it because you don't have security. You're going to get a label that tells you such. It might say no access. Now again, you could change that to be a numeric 0. And by the way, you can type in something else here. And this is probably a worthwhile thing to demonstrate. Maybe instead of missing, what I really like is NA. Well, I can do that. It's going to say NA now. And when I hit refresh, instead of getting a 0, I'm going to get NA. And again, it all depends on what you're looking to do, what's important. But what I thought was important is that you knew what your options were. Couple other things. Enable Essbase format string. I leave this checked, but in reality, this does nothing unless somebody, maybe your administrator, actually set up in the database how the data should be formatted. And this has to do with sometimes, well, you don't want just a number coming back. You want a piece of information that comes back that number represents. And so what this does is it allows Essbase to hand you the data the way your administrator expects you to see it. I leave it on all the time, but frankly, I never use it. If you were to have those things in there, then you'd want to make a decision as to whether or not you need to have this checked or not. Another really important thing here, another important option is repeated members. I'm going to demonstrate this. If I click on repeated members and check it on, it's going to suppress repeated members. And what that gives me, and remember I changed the NAs back to missings. But what this does is for nested dimensions, it gets rid of the outer nesting so that you're not repeating rows. Again, for reporting purposes, this might be nice. This might look good. If you're bringing in data for other reasons, like for example, if you're going to end up doing some sort of a VLOOKUP, which requires both dimensions to be looked up, you're not going to want to be doing this. But if you're formatting, this might be exactly what you want. So in this case, by suppressing repeated members, I now have a lot of blanks here, and maybe this looks better to me. Let's see. So let's turn that back off. Let's turn back no data missing, and I'm going to hit OK and refresh so that it goes back to looking. But I want to show one more thing, and that has to do with this: navigate without data. And this becomes extremely important if you have very, very large databases, very large Smartview spreadsheets. I'm going to turn it on for a second, just so you see what happens here. If I hit refresh now, all we're going to get back is a bunch of blanks. What this allows me to do is to pivot, to drill around. So for example, if I go here and I hit Essbase and I hit pivot, on a small sheet, even like I'm demonstrating, this really doesn't have much of a difference. If you're having a huge sheet with maybe tens of thousands of rows, which is quite large, and a lot of columns, it might take a while for the database to return your data. Meanwhile, maybe you just want to reorganize things a little bit. You don't want to have the refresh always going back to the data for more data. In that case, you turn this on, you see it's blank here. But if I go back to Smartview Options and now turn it off and I hit refresh, it will query the database in the format that I want, which is having been pivoted. So these are just a couple more options I thought you might find interesting, in case you wanted a little bit more detail on what some of these things are. I strongly recommend when needed. Well, there's no recommendation here, because in reality every single one of these options is completely based on what your needs are. And I've had needs for when I want the data to come back as missing, so I know that it's missing versus 0. And I've had times when I need it to come back as zeros so that users see a real 0 and not some kind of a NA or something like that. So it all depends on context, all depends on your choice, and I hope this has been of some help to you. Thank you very much.